We're going to pick up our notes today. Yesterday we ended talking about the 100 Years' War and the effects of it, and in particular the decline of feudalism, the weapons, in particular the longbow. We were speaking just a little bit about in France during the late 1400s, France's monarchy won much power and prestige. One of your notes I noticed in there as a typo, I have listed as Louis the 16th in your notes as XVI. It's XI. It's Louis the 11th. So please make a correction in that notes when we do the review on Thursday. I will certainly remind you of that. But Louis the 11th strengthened the bureaucracy in France. He kept the nobles under royal control and promoted trade and agriculture. And he worked to unite all royal feudal lands under his crown to unite, and he did a good job with that. So he would be a name you need to know from that section. This is during the 1400s, a French king. Once again, not Louis the 16th. That's later on, Louis the 11th. So please make that correction. In England, during the 100 Years' War, monarch's power had been limited by Parliament. Didn't have the king did not have absolute authority like the king would have in France at the time. But royal authority weakened even further as a result of the struggles amongst the nobility for control of the throne. The nobility was bitter about the loss of lands from the 100 Years' War, and this led to the Wars of the Roses. And that began in 1455, and the Wars of the Roses was known as that due to the symbols of the rival families involved. The House of Lancaster was the red rose, and the House of York the white rose, and these were their symbols. The House of Lancaster, the red rose backed King Henry VI, and the white rose ultimately backed Edward, Duke of York. King Henry VI was, and I put in your notes, he was weak, he was insane, and really everybody knew it. He was mentally unstable. He was not mentally unstable in a cruel way like a lot of historical tyrants have been, or kings or dictators, but he had some very serious issues, and it just made the situation worse. So Edward wound up overthrowing the weak and insane Henry VI, and he became Edward IV. And Edward IV brought stability for a while to England after years of bloody fighting. But his death in AD 1483 brought uncertainty back to England. So while they did have some stability there, there was uncertainty rose again in terms of the throne, who was going to take over. The Wars of the Roses was a long and bitter conflict. Civil wars typically are some of the nastiest wars because you're fighting amongst yourselves. I always give the examples of some of the worst fights you have are with your family. And that's maybe kind of a similar situation, but they tend to be the ugliest fights. And there was no exception here. Edward's two sons were the heirs of the throne. They were young, but Edward's brother Richard had the boys put in the tower, and it's believed that he had them murdered so he could become king. Now that's been sort of a historical mystery for years, whether he really did that or not. I can tell you my personal opinion is he did. If you just look at the facts of it and the circumstantial evidence, it just makes sense. And most people believed he did too. That he had these boys put in the tower and ultimately murdered so he could become king. And this is after he had told his brother when his brother was dying that he would essentially take care of them and raise them and prep the oldest one to become king one day. Certainly not the first person in history to murder family members to get ahead or to gain power. So he becomes King Richard III, and he didn't exactly have full support when he took over. But that was he became famous or infamous, King Richard III. The Wars of the Roses wound up ending, basically, for all practical matters, at the Battle of Bosworth Field. You'll need to know that. That's in your notes. A.D. 1485. Lancastrian forces led by Henry Tudor defeats Richard and kills him. Henry Tudor is crowned on the battlefield and becomes Henry VII, the first Tudor king. Henry VII eliminated rivals to the throne. He avoided costly wars and increased royal power over the nobles. So that actually brought some stability and strength in the monarchy. And the monarchy became strengthened as it emerged from the Wars of the Roses. Henry VII's more infamous or famous son, Henry VIII, that was part of his lineage, his line. His granddaughters would have been Mary I and Elizabeth I. This is all part of the Tudor dynasty, is where it begins with Henry VII. There's a documentary that I've shown my older groups. I don't think I've shown y'all. I may get that up and we'll talk about that on the review and get you the information how to watch it on YouTube. Very interesting. It's probably one of my more favorite documentaries. It's not done in a typical way where one person's sitting there like I am now talking to you about what's going on, about Henry VII's birth, his mother, and how she unbelievably schemed and connived and dealt her way to the position of her son becoming king one day. But he winds up winning. If I think I told y'all during the Protestant Reformation, it had everything of not the Protestant Reformation, the English Reformation, it had everything of a soap opera, love and betrayal and all these things. And the Wars of the Roses is, really no different. If you like a soap opera, you'll like the information you can find out of that, not just in the book, but in other sources. Spain during the AD 1400s emerged as a leading European power. The Reconquista or reconquest of areas Muslims had taken from them at the time. By AD 1250, only Granada were in the hands of the Moors. Moors is a term for Spanish Muslims. In AD 1469, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile are married. They become the very famous king and queen of Spain. Ferdinand and Isabel, we've talked about them already this year. But their armies forced to surrender the last Moor stronghold in Granada. And to help unite Spain, wanted all Spaniards under the same faith, which would have been Catholicism at the time. And Moors and Jews were they were to convert or they were to leave. But Ferdinand and Isabel also set up the Spanish Inquisition to enforce Catholic teaching in the country. It would imprison anyone suspected of heresy. But they also strengthened the monarchy in Spain. They were the ones that backed Columbus. We talked about that several lessons back. But they were, famous royal couple for Spain at the time. I did make a mention in here of the Holy Roman Emperor. During the Middle Ages, the Holy Roman Empire was Europe's largest political body, made up mostly German and Italian and Slavic lands. The Holy Roman Emperor came to power through being elected by a diet, which means assembly. I have that term in your notes. You'll need to know it, of mostly German princes. So there was actually election involved, and one of the most ambitious Habsburg emperors was Maximilian, and Maximilian I was elected emperor in 1493. He comes from the House of Habsburg, and when he married Mary of Burgundy, acquired the lands of Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. And he becomes one of the more famous Holy Roman emperors, strengthening that position. And his grandson Charles V becomes King of Spain and was later elected to be the Holy Roman Emperor himself. And this made the Habsburgs the most powerful family in Europe at the time. And we're talking, of course, this is the section we're going through of strengthening the monarchy during this time of history. We're going to stop there. The notes to that point where I just stopped when we're talking about Charles V will be the end of your notes for the test that you'll take on Friday. Please remember, Thursday your Zoom review will be 1 o'clock. It'll be 1 o'clock. I will get you the password and the ID you'll need for that. I'll put that in Gradebook Wizard. I know we had troubles with this last week, where some people could get in, some people could not. Hopefully we won't have that issue this week. Most of y'all know how to contact me now. Send me an email, text me if you have my phone number, or have your parents do so, and just let me know if you're out. I'll make sure we set up another review if we have to. Zoom's probably being overwhelmed right now. Everybody's using them for these meetings, so hopefully we won't have any issues this week, and I'll see you then. Thanks.